You're listening to Icebreakers, the podcast exploring all things Canadian and Eurasian, business, culture, and personalities. The series is produced by CERBA, the Canada-Eurasia-Russia Business Association. We're a non-profit supporting trade, investment, and good relations between Canada and the countries of Eurasia. I'm your host, Nathan Hunt, one of the founders of CERBA and former chairman of the National Board. I invite you to tune in regularly for valuable insights relating to the region. I'm joined today by Craig Cohon, London-based businessman, global entrepreneur, cultural enthusiast, and investor. Craig is responsible for bringing Coca-Cola to the Soviet Union, which now is, of course, a multi-billion-dollar business. And he has many cultural achievements to his name, one of the most impressive of which would be running the torch in the 2014 Sochi Winter Olympics. Craig is currently Chief Strategy Officer at ApiJect, and I should say a good friend of CERBA's. It's great to see you today, Craig.
Nice to see you again after all these years.
After all these years, we've been on stage so many times together.
Over the last 15 years, yes. I think we age well.
We do. I've lost all my hair, but that happens, you know?
That's the good thing about podcasts.
That nobody sees, exactly.
Exactly right.
Tell me, Craig, how long have you been involved in Canada-Russia trade? When was your first trip to Russia? How did you get started?
Well, obviously, my father started in 1976, meeting the Soviet Delegation in Montreal to the Olympics. And so I was 13 when I first got exposed to the Soviets, when Dad was running McDonald's and owning McDonald's in Canada. So all the way back to 1976. So I would say 45 years.
45 years, good Lord.
Yeah.
I think your father was involved in introducing McDonald's to Russia, but you probably were not that involved because you were a kid. But you were heavily involved in the introduction of Coca-Cola. Can you tell us some stories about that? How did Coca-Cola get introduced to Russia?
Well, Coke had always been behind Pepsi in the Soviet Union in the 70s and 80s. And when Dad opened up McDonald's in Moscow in 1990, I was fortunate enough to be working at the Coca-Cola company on a truck in Miami, door-to-door salesman at the age of 26. And so I wrote a letter to the president and CEO of the Coca-Cola company, who was 15 levels above me, and said, I think I want to move to the Soviet Union and try to get Coca-Cola in the Soviet Union. And he said, geez, Craig, no one else wants that job. Go ahead. And that's how it started back in 1990. I moved there on June the 7th, 1990, and began the unbelievable expedition and journey to bring Coca-Cola to the Soviet Union at that time.
So you started living permanently in Russia in June of 1990.
That's correct. I was the first Coca-Cola employee in the former Soviet Union, and I think there were maybe 20 business people from the West at that time in the entire country. Remember, there were no fax machines back then. There was no internet. There was no email. Nobody spoke English. It was a very, very different place.
It was all done by telex, wasn't it? Do you remember that?
Of course, it was all done by telex. It was fantastic. It was a great time. So, there was no such thing as brands, as you remember. So there would be the Moloko magazine or the CERBA in the milk store or the cheese store or the meat store. There was no brand. There was no Impossible Foods or Beyond Meat or Coca-Cola or Pepsi. Didn't exist.
Now, didn't you end up getting Coke put on the table at one of the summit meetings? I'm trying to remember. What's the story behind that?
So when you're 26 years old, you feel like you're invincible. And one of the things that I really hated was Pepsi was always on the summit tables between Khrushchev and Richard Nixon, as an example, back in the old days. So I promised the board of the Coca-Cola company that I would get Coca-Cola on the summit table between Bush and Gorbachev, which was a very difficult thing. Obviously, it has to go through the Kremlin. It has to go through the tasters at the Kremlin. It has to go through the KGB at the Kremlin. The head of the tasting group was a 28-year-old, beautiful Soviet woman that I had the chance to meet and greet. And through a number of different iterations with her over many, many evenings, she finally allowed the Coca-Cola bottle to be on the table versus the Pepsi bottle. That's how I got it on. So I got a telex, and I'll send it to you. I got a telex from Don Keogh, who was the head of the Coca-Cola company at the time. He goes, "I saw it on the table. I know who put it there. I don't want to know how it got there."
Oh, good Lord. International man of mystery, shall we say.
And that was the first time. So there was no Coca-Cola in the country. That was the first time. So we started big in the Kremlin, and then we worked from there. And I have many stories to share with you at the right time.
Well, I can remember living in the Soviet Union in the 1980s, and you're absolutely right. It was all Pepsi-Cola in Cyrillic letters. There wasn't a Coke to be had. So I was shocked and pleasantly surprised when I started traveling in the early 90s and discovered that Coca-Cola had finally found its way to the Russian store shelves.
But the story of us getting there is interesting. It's many phases. So phase number one was try to understand how the system works. So I spent 6 months, riding on the underground, working at a Tchaikovsky, Champansky Zavod, working at the place that produced Fanta for us and Pepsi. Saw that the concentrate from Pepsi or Coke or ever would go in very dirty bottles. People would be corrupt on the way that they would distribute the product. The bottles were all the same. There would be very dirty facilities, and this was all the Soviet system. And I could see, once I understood that, I sent old movies to the board of directors, and I said, I think it's time for us not to use the system and build our own factory.
You're talking about to make the bottles.
To make Coca-Cola in the Soviet Union, not use the Soviet infrastructure.
Oh,
Pepsi was using the Soviet infrastructure. So after those 6 months of exploration, I went to the board. I asked for tens of millions of dollars to build the first factory. They said yes, and they said, get it done. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing then. So that was step one. How are you going to build a factory in the Soviet Union when the Soviet system is crumbling and there is no way to lease land? There is no way to build, bring in your own manufacturing facility. So it was a great adventure as I entered stage two.
Supply chain must have been a challenge. I mean, how do you even get safety equipment or anything to the factory when the Soviet Union was just entering the world stage at that point?
So the way we got the deal done is I met a person by the name of Marshal Akrameyev, who unfortunately committed suicide in the Kremlin. He was a senior government official. He was so upset by the downfall of the Soviet Union, he committed suicide. But he said, I like the Coca-Cola system because it's a system, and our system is crumbling, and so let me find land for you. So him and the mayor started looking for land. And what I realized is, how do you get to the mayor of Moscow when you're a 26-year-old foreign business person that doesn't speak the language? You find out when he's flying to New York, and you sit beside him on the Aeroflot flight in business class, which is exactly what I did.
Clever. Good Lord. Now, which mayor? Are we talking about Popov here or Lushkov?
We're talking Popov. Lushkov was his deputy. I sat beside Popov for 8 hours on the flight to New York and convinced him that it was a good thing to put a Coca-Cola factory. And that started a year process of getting 21 signatures on a piece of paper to lease land that was not leasable. There was no way to lease land back then. So I had to go to the Kremlin and create new laws with the Minister of the Economy. Every Tuesday, I focused on the sauna with Lushkov as he beat the shit out of me, trying to make sure that I was tough enough.
Lushkov himself, good Lord.
No, Lushkov, yeah, beat the shit out of me every Tuesday on my back in the sauna.
Lucky you.
which was better me than you.
I was going to say, aren't you the fortunate one?
Yeah. I think on December 17th, I'll never forget this, December 17th, after running around Moscow for months, getting 21 signatures across every single department to get the land and a permission to make this happen. I walked into Lushkov's office and he saw all the signatures. He was the last signature. And he gave me the biggest, most profound, wettest kiss on my lips I have ever had from any human. Saying,
oh dear.
He said, He said, nobody knows from the West how you made this happen, but I do. Thank you for pushing so hard. And that was an incredible honor to have that signed piece of paper and then start the.
That's an amazing story. Lushkov was quite the figure for many years in Russia in the 1990s. He could have even been president, some people said, but somebody else took that spot.
Amazing.
And it was the factory in Moscow, the Coke factory?
Yeah, it was in a place called Solntsevo, and Solntsevo had a very Solntsevsky Semya. The Solntsevsky family was a very tough, shakedown mafia family that lived opposite our factory. Very tough guys.
The Solntsevo band was the bandits of Solntsevo were quite famous in the 90s, yes.
They were famous. They were so famous, they put a rocket-propelled hand grenade into my office at 5 a.m, the day before we were supposed to open the factory. And
they shot a hand grenade into your office, did I understand you correctly?
A rocket-propelled hand grenade, which is the one that came off over the top from the buildings across the street. And they gave me a message. Obviously, that was a message: don't mess with the Solntsevsky family. And I have never had any trouble in the Soviet Union. I've never been shaken down. I've never been asked for bribes ever because I've been very lucky and I speak the language and et cetera, which I'll tell you about in a second.
So after the hand grenade incident, you didn't have to pay some local boss. You managed to get around that.
No, never. So I walked up to the head of the local boss and I said, why would you do that? We're bringing tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars into the country. We're going to employ thousands of people. Why would you put a rocket-propelled hand grenade through my office? And he looked at me in a little bit like a kid and said, I just want my guys to get jobs. And I said, interview and you get the jobs. And we hired several of his people to be legitimate drivers. So that's.
You told him there are better ways to get attention, right?
Much better ways.
So, Craig, we've talked about Coca-Cola and your achievements there. Let's switch gears now to arts and culture, specifically Cirque du Soleil, whom you introduced to Russia. I read that Cirque sold more than 3 million tickets since opening here, which is an impressive figure. Tell us the story there. How did you launch Cirque du Soleil in Russia?
I was with Coke there for many years, 4 years, and then on and off until 1998. And then I needed a break. I got a phone call from my dad who knew Guy Laliberté and Daniel Lamar, the CEO of Cirque du Soleil, and he says, Craig, do you want your second round in the Soviet Union? And I have to keep on telling you more about my first round a little later in this podcast. But the second round, I said, yeah, sure, let's do it. And so another adventure ensued. Lushkov was still the mayor. I was a glutton for punishment in the sauna again. And we brought Cirque du Soleil in 2009 to Moscow. It was the first, large, big shows that were there permanently for a very long time. We launched it with Eurovision in 2009. We sold tickets to Verikai at the early start, and then it was an amazing 10 years of 14 shows all over the country, touring the shows.
Now, did you use an existing circus facility, or did you have to build? I think you had to build one, didn't you?
No. Of course, we use touring facilities. So we brought our own system in, and hundreds of millions of dollars of investment over the course of time. Thousands of artists displaying their amazing talents to the Soviet. We made a deal in 2011 to rent the Kremlin Palace, and this is when Putin was coming back, and there was some trouble on the streets. We cut a deal to rent the place for, I think it was 12 weeks. First time ever. People have gone there and played once. We rent the whole palace, 5,000 seats. We brought a show in, and we sold out every night. We sold 365,000 tickets. It was the #1 largest selling show in the world at that time at the Kremlin Palace, over and over and over. So it was incredibly wonderful experience.
What a great venue. I remember the opening night of Cirque du Soleil. Do you remember standing with me in line or meeting me in line, and I saw your son Jonas? He must have been 10 years old then. Do you remember that?
Of course, he was 10. My daughter Amber was 9 at the time, And they grew up with me in Russia during those times, which was wonderful. Even though I was flying back and forth from London to Moscow at that time.
I have to ask you. You said chapter 2 was this, but I didn't finish chapter 1. We'll get back to that. Did I cut you off? And tell me what more you can tell us about chapter 1. I know you had a romance with a Soviet actress. I can't remember her name. Tell us what you wanted to tell us.
Is that the Soviet actress that you wanted to date at the time, and I actually got the I think that's correct.
I have no idea what you're talking about, but no, I don't remember. I don't recall dating any Soviet actresses in my time.
So, obviously, when you're 26 and you're single, and you're representing the Coca-Cola company, and it's 1991, it's a wonderful time to meet, people from other cultures. So I met this Soviet actress named Tatiana. I won't tell the last name because it might be not appropriate, but she was the number one Soviet actress at the time, and I fell in love with her. And she said, "Craig Georgievich, если ты хочешь любовь меня," as in, Craig, if you want to sleep with me, тебе нужно говорить по-русски. You must speak Russian. And at the time, I was not speaking Russian at all.
Oh, what an incentive.
It was an amazing incentive. 6 weeks later, I was speaking incredible Russian in her apartment, having a bottle of vodka, cucumbers, and tomato in her kitchen. We made love, which was wonderful. Obviously, in your 20s, it always is wonderful. Very romantic.
This podcast is PG-13, just to let you know. So,
we didn't say anything wrong. We said making love, and that's a wonderful
thing. Of course. I'm giggling as we speak, but no. So Tatiana, you were in her kitchen, and you learned Russian from her, is what you're telling us.
Over the course, and so many other wonderful artists. But making love, I pass out. I turn around. I hear a pointing at my head. Is a Kalashnikov with 2 guys in her apartment, had broken into her apartment.
Are you kidding? Were these her guards?
They pushed me out into the street. I am butt naked, minus 20 degrees, over at by the Aerostar Hotel, which is Olympijski. I walk from Olympijski to Plotnikov Perelug, which is Oktyabrskaya 2, naked.
Are you kidding me?
No, you can't make this stuff up.
Plotnikov Perelug is Arbat. I mean, that's a 2-mile walk, a 3-mile walk.
Yeah, it was cold. It was very, very cold. And these were KGB guys that said to me, "You will not, as a foreigner, date our most famous Soviet actress. Don't touch her again."
Astounding. And that was the end of your romance, or were you not going to be intimidated? How did that end up?
Here's what was amazing. That was November of 91, the end of December, it all crumbled. KGB crumbled, the empire crumbled, as you know. The KGB came to me afterwards and said, "Here's your file. You're free to do whatever you want." And so we continued our romance for, a year, and that was that.
Good Lord, saved by the bell, as they say.
Yes, very much so. So that's how I learned Russian. I learned Russian from Tatiana. I learned Russian from Sergei Mazayev, my buddy, who's Morality Codex, a great rock star. My artistic friends were wonderful back then because there were no businessmen. Like businessman, right? The word businessman doesn't exist in Russian. Businessman.
They take it from English. Yeah, they call each other businessman. It's a Russian word now, or businessmen. So you never had formal training in Russian. I've heard your Russian. It's pretty good.
Yeah, no, I never had formal training, but I was forced to speak it because no one else spoke it back in 1990, 91, 92. And if you're going to understand a culture, you better dig in, and learn it and appreciate it and experience it. And I love the Russians for many reasons, which I'd like to share with you.
So tell us some stories. I know you mentioned Sergei Mazayev, the famous rock star of Russia. I know you were friends with Andrei Boltenko, the journalist and editor-in-chief of Channel 1. Is that not right? Do you have any stories about them?
Yeah, I have tons of stories. Where do we start? So I'd say Mazayev. Mazayev started his Morality Codex, which has sold millions of albums, 25 years ago. And I think I gave him $5,000 in cash to do his first video back then.
Oh,
and
really?
He's been a friend ever since, which is wonderful. Andrei Boltanka, who did the opening ceremonies for Sochi, the 2014 Olympics. I've done many shows with him, with Cirque du Soleil and others. So he's a great friend. And so I think what I love about the Russians, and forget the narrative today, and forget the narrative since the 1960s. I don't care about the narrative, the political narrative. What I love about the Russians is they are warm, they are kind, they are heartfelt. If you're a friend, they will back you up, whatever it takes. If you're sick, they'll take care of you. If you're down and out, they'll take care of you. And so I really think that them as a culture of people, that might be the FSB calling about this story that I
yeah, that's the deep Russian soul, as they say. Глубокая русская душа.
Yeah, and I love the Russian soul. I love the Russian soul because it's very real. And so if you don't have that and you haven't experienced it, you don't really understand Russia. It's a wonderful thing. It really is. And that relationship all the way from my dad meeting Yakovlev in 1976, who was the theologian behind Perestroika and the Soviet ambassador to Canada at that time. And he was my basically Russian uncle. You just don't know how wrong our relationship is with Russia now, because we don't understand them. They look like us. They have a different, they think that everyone thinks they're European, but they are incredibly respectful of themselves. And when you have that respect for them, they respect you back.
You're taking the words right out of my mouth, Craig. You won't believe I gave those same words at a speech to 200 people in the USA about a month and a half ago. So all you need to do is respect the Russians and they'll respect you back. But we seem to have trouble doing that over the last 5 to 7 years, unfortunately.
And it doesn't really matter who makes the first move. It's the first move is the one that's the hardest. And as soon as that happens, everything else falls away.
Well, there's a U.S.-Russian summit just a few weeks from, we're recording this in late May, so we'll see what happens at the summit in mid-June. Maybe something positive will come out of that. Who knows?
I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that there'll be some road to recovery and reconciliation for sure. But I think that the other thing I think about Russia, it's a matriarchal society masquerading as a patriarchal.
Really?
Yeah, I believe that. I believe,
You mean the women are in charge?
I believe that the women are in charge of the country. Deep down, that's why it's called Mother Russia. It's not, in Germany, it was called the Fatherland back then, but it is Mother Russia. And at Cirque du Soleil, I only hired women. So my second time around, I had 30 women working at Cirque du Soleil, only one man.
Now, do you mean you're not talking about the performers? You're talking about the administrators.
The administrators, the business people, the logistics people, the people that got it done, the finance people, they were incredible. Obviously, the performers were half and half always, but I think it's a matriarchal society, and once you understand that, you respect it much more, much more.
You mentioned funding the first video of Sergei Mazayev, and didn't he perform at the Sochi Olympics? Were you at the Sochi Olympics? Did you see the Canadian team there? Did you have any experiences?
I did. I was asked to be the ambassador for the Canadian team in 2014. I flew to Calgary in 2013 to brief them all on what it would be like coming to Russia. So I briefed them on what it's like to go to the sauna. I briefed them on drinking culture, which I have a point of view on, which is interesting. So yeah, it was great. It's great fun to be with the Canadians, and they obviously won the gold medal in hockey. I was there for that with my son Jonas, watching them beat Sweden at the time. It was incredible and very upsetting for the Russians to lose in the semifinals or the quarters.
Yes, I remember that. They crashed out.
Would you like to know my point of view on where it all went wrong?
Where did it all go wrong? Tell us.
I think it went wrong in 2014. So this is before the issue with Ukraine. No Western political leader came to the opening ceremonies of the Olympics. So Putin had spent all his money, It was a huge opportunity for Russia on the global stage from a sports standpoint, and every single G20 leader didn't come. And the reason they didn't come was because of the issue around gender issues that had popped up and communication to below 18-year-olds of gay rights and lesbian rights and queer rights. And I will tell you, as someone who owned part of the Cirque du Soleil business in Russia, we have many, many gay and lesbian artists, and they have always felt incredibly welcome across Russia, incredibly welcome. I think the West got it wrong, and that was a slap in the face to Putin, and it really started a downward spiral in the relationship. That little moment there, I think, was a real downward spiral, because then it was about respect.
And it's just been incident after incident since then. You're absolutely right. It started with gay rights because the Russians passed a law that the LGBT community believes is restrictive. But it's funny that we don't see the same protests against the Saudis, who also don't respect gay rights, against the Iranians who don't, or against many Asian societies that don't respect gay rights. And I heard a Russian interloper tell me the problem is that we're white. The problem is we Russians are white, and everybody in the West thinks that we're like them because of that. And we're not. He says we're an entirely different culture here.
Well, not only that, I would tell you that my great friends who are women there said, Craig, you didn't have 20 million men killed in the Second World War, either by the Germans or by Stalin. And they wiped out a huge cohort of men. And so for Russian women, you know, it's a very different thing for Russian women because they lost so many of their men. So let's just separate out the issues, right? Separate out that I am for gender identification and equality and equity on that side. I am 100%. At the same stage, you have a whole culture that has lost 20 million men. So there's not as many men out there to produce with.
Yeah,
it's a real serious issue, and you know it's very hard for the West to understand that.
Yeah, it is. It is. The sacrifices the Russians made in World War II, and people who are connected with Russia know it, but it's hard to believe that their casualties were of an order greater than ours. And that's not to belittle the contribution. I would never belittle the contribution of the Western powers, of the USA, of Canada, of the UK to the great victory in World War II. But if you look at sheer numbers of deaths, certainly Russia paid the price.
They paid the price, and that's why they have such incredible honor on May the 9th every year. It is an important day. Would you like to know my little contribution to nuclear disarmament?
I would like to know your contribution. I didn't know you had any contribution to nuclear disarmament, although I suppose at this point I shouldn't be surprised.
My grandfather's from Dnepropetrovsk, which is a part of the Soviet Union. It's in Ukraine. It's an industrial city. It's on the Dnieper River. My father went there a number of times as a celebrity because he had brought McDonald's there. And so when I moved to Moscow, I was picked up in a Yak-40 private plane by the mayor of Dnepropetrovsk and flown down because he wanted, you know, obviously Coca-Cola. That morning, I go to a wonderful tractor factory, the largest tractor factory in the Soviet Union, and I start drinking with the head of the tractor factory, who at the time was Kuchma, who became prime minister for many years.
The future president of Ukraine.
Yes, the future president of Ukraine. And so we're drinking and drinking. He pushes a button. He goes, Craig, I want you to see what we produce here. The doors open up, these huge steel doors. Вот, что мы сделаем здесь? He says, this is what we do here, SS-17 missiles.
You're saying he was producing the missiles in that facility where you were at, in Dnepropetrovsk?
Yes, and obviously the Americans knew because it was part of the START II negotiation and treaties, but he had all these missiles there without the physics and the nuclear warheads. He said, "Тебе нужно купить два." I said, you need to buy 2 missiles. And I'm drunk by 11 o'clock. and I say, how much? He goes, 100,000 each. I say, done deal. So I transferred the money because I thought, I called the CEO of the Coca-Cola company worldwide. He goes, "You're fired."
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. No. You're totally fired. It's against the code of business conduct. You have no authority to, basically buy missiles from the Soviets. I said,
it's against the Coca-Cola code of business conduct to buy nuclear weapons, is what you're telling me.
Yeah, but it wasn't a nuclear weapon. It was just the vessel. It was the housing, right? There was
the casing.
It was the casing. And I said, "Mr. Keogh, I appreciate that you think this might be absolutely crazy, but give me a week." And so a week later, I had taken the casing, cut it into 5, made it into Coca-Cola kiosks, and had Coca-Cola being sold on Red Square up and down Tverskoy Boulevard on the front page of the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. And I have copies of that as a way how Coca-Cola contributed to ending the nuclear race. And I got rehired the next day.
Good Lord, what a story. That's hard to believe.
So
you didn't keep one of those missiles in your basement just in case you get raided or the burglars come?
No, and I was obviously the burglars did come in Russia, but they weren't looking for that stuff. There was no nuclear warheads, there was no uranium. It was just the casing, and that was an amazing day in my life.
Amazing indeed. So tell me, I'm going to ask you something.
Okay.
This is a little personal. When you're dead and gone, what will we find out about you that will surprise us? Give us a little advance notice. Our listeners can't see your expression, but I can. You're looking down. Come on, Craig. Come clean with us.
I'm thinking. I'm actually thinking if anything is not transparent in what I'm saying. And I don't think there's any secrets. I have no secrets.
We've heard it all.
No, I'll come back. I'm sure there's something I've forgotten. I mean, like, for instance, I forgot that I was offered Lenin's air conditioning system underneath Lenin's tomb one day. You
were offered to purchase that?
I was offered to purchase that. I forgot about that.
As a souvenir, or to condition your office, or what on earth was the story there?
To condition, yeah. It was cold. It was a hot month in Moscow, and he said, "Hey, what do you want Lenin's unit?" So maybe I forgot. I forgot that I brought 50 to 100 bags of cash rubles into my apartment in 1991 because there were no banking systems, and I counted it step by step, and then transferred it to Atlanta as our first revenue for the Coca-Cola system. What else have I forgotten? I've forgotten that. I've forgotten the after party of Cirque du Soleil after the Kremlin. I forgot to tell you about that. And
what can you tell us about that party?
I forgot to tell you that there was 400 people there to very late at night at the Arbat, which was a wonderful celebration of the bodies of incredible people that might rock your world, I would say. I forgot to tell you about that too. Yeah.
And it was where? Where was the venue?
I forgot to tell you about that too.
You still don't remember the venue. I'm sensing an R rating here. I should.
Yeah, but you know what I haven't forgot to tell you, and what I would like to say is, as Canadians and Russians, we have to find a way to work together because we have so many things in common. We have a sense of humor in common. Very funny.
Yep.
I mean, incredible. I think Canadians are some of the funniest people in the world. I think Russians appreciate that. I think we are some of the best hockey players in the world, and we have to appreciate that. We have two of the largest countries in the world. We have wonderful women on both sides. We have smart business people. We have natural resources. So, not getting together is really an awful thing. And I hope that we can, we've been through these times before, Canada and Russia, and I hope that you're right. The future is bright for both countries. And I want to be a part of helping make that, continue to make that happen because our family has been doing that since, 1976.
Your family certainly has made a tremendous contribution. Now, you also play the saxophone. I think, right? Did you ever do that in Russia?
Oh, this is what I didn't tell you. Ha! Okay, when I'm dead. So my 30th birthday, I'm at Stalin's dacha on the outskirts of, right by MGU. I don't know if you've ever been there.
Yes, I've been there. Yes, I know.
I was the first person to be able to use that dacha who was not Russian at the time. My buddy, Miles Druckmann, for our 30th birthday. And so Yakovlev was there, and Bakatin was there, who was the head of the KGB for a little bit of time. And Sergei Mazayev was there. And Sergei was allowing me to play saxophone that night. And so he goes outside, and we're all having a whiskey, and he pulls out a doobie. And obviously it's legal now in Canada, so that's fine. So
we can talk about this on the air. Okay.
We can talk about it on the air. But I'm sitting there with Bakatin, the head of the KGB, my dad, Yakovlev, and Sergei Mazayev. He starts smoking a doobie. I take a puff. I pass it to my dad, who takes a puff. And I pass it to Bakatin, the head of the KGB, who takes a puff. And just imagine, 1993, Stalin's dacha, who would be absolutely turning over in his dacha, as these foreigners are smoking a doobie for a 30th birthday party celebrating, international Международная дружба, international friendship.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. In 1993, you could do that. Unbelievable. Well, I think you've seen it all, Craig.
Not all, but a little bit. And there's, I just think that we forget how hard it was. And, the Russians are free people to travel.
Yeah.
There might not be the democracy that we like, but there are great things that have happened. And I think future things will happen. That's great. They have to keep that country together. You don't want it to internally explode, obviously, because of all the languages and regions. And, it's a dangerous country if it was to break up. So I hope we can hopefully we can figure out a way to work together.
Now, I'll close by asking you two quick questions. What is it that made you a leader, first and foremost?
Realizing that leadership is about the listening that you do with others and asking the right questions. It's not about having the answers. It's about asking the questions. And so I was very fortunate to grow up in a family with my father who asked great questions, and mentors that ask great questions, and it allows people to speak their point of view and feel engaged in the process. And you get the transparency and wonderful ideas coming from your teams. Now,
I'll ask you the last question. I know you're living in London now. You're living on for goodness sake, is that a boat? You're living on a boat in London.
I live on a boat.
Will you be coming back to Russia? You're young. You're full of energy. It seems like the sky's the limit. You've got more projects that are ready to be implemented under your watch. What are your plans? What are your greatest priorities in life now?
I am. Oh, okay. So this is new. I'm going to be 58 next week. In 2 years, I am walking from London to Moscow.
You are walking from London to Moscow.
Yes. So I have made a commitment to walk from London to Moscow.
There's a bit of water in the middle. I don't know if you've studied the map carefully.
What do you mean?
There's some water between London and Moscow.
Okay, well, I'll do a kayak across that's not a big. But I'm going to do it to raise some money for a group called Global Citizen. I'm going to do it to probably connect Russians, my Russian friends and my North American friends and European friends. And I think it'll be a wonderful 6 or 7 months of people. So anyone that wants to join me on my venture, please don't hesitate. But yes, so I'll go to Moscow and then we'll see what happens from there.
Okay. Oh, well, fascinating. Well, you do have to let us know when that project comes to fruition, because we will certainly help you promote it and we'll help you raise money. All joking aside, CERBA will be a part of that.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I'm very excited to keep on connecting with Russia and make sure that the Canadian flag shines very brightly for the Russian people and the Russian flag shines brightly for the Canadians.
Well, we wave it proudly over here. We do. Thank you for your time today, Craig. It's been a wonderful discussion, and you've been a great guest, and I will look forward to seeing you next time you're in Moscow.
Great. I look forward to seeing you too. Have a great day.
You've been listening to Icebreakers, the podcast produced by CERBA, a nonprofit business association supporting trade, investment, and good relations between Canada and the countries of Eurasia. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe to the show and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. You can join our LinkedIn group to send questions to guests and find more information about the podcast series in general on our website at www.cerbanet.org. Thanks for tuning in.